Hello and welcome to the All Things ITSM Global Podcast. We're here at Las Vegas for Knowledge 16. My name is Carlsonof. We're here with Ken Gonzalez.
Hey, Carlos.
Charlie Betts.
Carlos.
And Shane Carlson.
Carlos,
Welcome back, Shane. Great to see you again.
Good to be among the living again.
Great seeing you.
Yeah, Shane, it's great to see you. It's been a couple years, and you've actually made some very interesting transitions. You've now with CSC, and you've got a very impressive new title at Global. Well, you say it yourself.
You can't remember.
I'm a
Principal
of Service Management Strategy for CSC's Global Infrastructure Services portfolio.
Yeah, that's
a
wow.
long name.
well, yeah.
Just call me Bob.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and what you're seeing in the service management
Sure.
space?
A lot of what I'm doing right now is kind of focusing on taking a lot of the traditional ITO-based service management products, things like service desk, local support, a lot of the service management process-oriented services required to deliver the ITO services. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of modernize them. I think as everyone's aware, the ITO space is going through a lot of transformation right now. Mm-hmm. And the age of the 5-year, multi-$100-million ITO deals to a single source have gone away. And the majority of businesses out there today are doing a lot of multi-sourcing. So the deals out there today are different than they were. The way services are delivered from those multiple providers and the complexities around managing across the service stack with all those providers in place has gotten a lot more complicated. So what I'm hoping to do is take some of my learnings from the outside world, partnering with a lot of these IT organizations over the last couple of years at fruition, and kind of bring a new and fresh approach to some of the products that are necessary to deliver those larger IT services from a service management point of view.
Interesting. Sounds like we haven't talked today yet about supplier integration and management, but of course what you said there seems to be all about SIAM.
That is a big part of it. Yeah. That was a big part of it.
Yeah. So I know thinking, we had conversations about the millennials, so you're taking an organization or an industry space that's already challenging and now helping to convert that, but also targeting a demographic that is rather diverse.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the things at CSC we've been spending a lot of time doing is figuring out how do we take our customers through the digital transformation that's going on right now. And it's not easy, as you said. You've got a diverse group of employees in every possible age range who have every possible expectation of the technology they use every day. You have people walking in the door who are just now entering the workplace who are used to walking around with more technology in their pocket and more access to information than most of us who had been in corporate IT have had for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So the expectations about how technology should work is changing dramatically. And nobody from a worker point of view has the time or energy necessary to figure out how to go to 5 different places to get one thing. Mm-hmm. So, from a provider point of view, we've got to get better at working together, whether we're working, by ourselves or with 5 different other providers to get that experience down for the customer.
Mm-hmm. Shane, it's interesting that you use the word expectations, because I was just thinking about that as you were talking. From a traditional ITSM perspective, we are used to talking about expectations from a customer perspective. But with this whole digital transformation going on, it seems to me that there's now expectations being set throughout the entire ecosystem. And can you talk a little bit about how that actually plays out?
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that, because I say all the time that people's expectations about technology are set at home before they even step into the workplace. Yes. So if they're at home and they can log on to OneDrive and they can have access to any file anywhere at any time on any device, regardless of whether they're on vacation in Hawaii or driving in the car, hopefully they're a passenger, anywhere where they have access to the internet, they have access to all of their services on any device, any time. And so they walk into the workplace and suddenly they don't have that same level of access to technology. So they get frustrated. They're not as productive as they could be. So a lot of what we're doing, in the ITO provider side of the world is figuring out how do we match the expectation people have coming in every day with the technology they use for the personal consumer products to the corporate world. And I think that's the challenge that all of us in the industry have right now is how do we get to the point where we're meeting expectations and people don't look at corporate technology as a drain, but they actually see it as a benefit.
Yeah. Does that factor into how enterprises are actually engaging with people in terms of outsourcing as well as their technology providers and other types of entities that they may need to engage to deliver the kind of experiences that their customers want and need.
I think it is. I think it is, and Charlie talked a little bit about SIAM, touched on it earlier, and I think that's a big piece of it. Is there is an expectation that whether I buy services from provider A, provider B, provider C, that if each of those are responsible for delivering a part of that service across that service value chain, that they're doing so in a way that's consistent and can be interlocked with all of the services of all of the other providers. At the end of the day, they don't care that this provider here doesn't have a good relationship with this provider. If this provider is providing a piece in that service value chain that relies on this provider, they damn well better get their stuff together to get that delivered.
Yeah.
See, I'm self-censoring. That's a progress for me. Carlos is doing things in 3 takes. I'm doing stuff by self-censoring.
Yeah, I mean, and along that line, I think it's the old story. We don't care as a consumer as to where along the chain it broke.
Exactly.
If I come to you and you already went through 7, I'm just looking at you as being a failure.
Exactly.
Not, Charlie dropped the ball on the way in or anything like that. And that's where I think it gets really difficult, where even if you say, hey, it was another provider, I don't care. We're seeing that in so many different spaces. And I think that's where, we've been talking user experience terminology for about a year or so now. And it seemed like it's finally starting to catch on in a much broader base. And it's this, the term I like to use is, it's a facade, right? So how I see it with the hat that I'm wearing at that point in time, I want to see it presented and I want to see it filtered in a certain way. Yep. I may go home and I want the same stuff from the background presented differently. And I think that's where, from a corporate perspective, I don't think we're quite there yet. We're talking about it. And how long is this going to take?
Well, we've been talking about it for 10 or 15 years in various forms, and it's interesting for those of us who have been around long enough to see everything go from the client server side of the world to the as-a-service model for everything. It's been a very interesting transition to see people who hired a dedicated IT staff to support dedicated vertical technologies in a dedicated data center with dedicated power and everything else to suddenly let's sprinkle a little bit in the cloud because the CIO says they need to do that, to walking into an environment today where you may have 20 different providers using, managing as a service, AWS, they may be using, cloud networking. Everything you can imagine has been unbolted from the corporate data centers, spread to the 4 corners of the world, but yet we still expect it to work and run and do things way better than when we had it all under our control. And that's the challenge we have today.
Yeah, that's a bit of a contradiction almost. Yeah, right.
In some ways, and the speed at which we're moving, the pace at which we expect technology to work. I'm talking just in the service management world. You look at ServiceNow, for instance, people expect to be up and running in weeks. Whereas previously we talked about 18 months to years to get to the places where we're getting. I don't know if any of you guys sat in the Oshkosh presentation that Greg Downer did earlier today. They did a big bang approach where literally they implemented, I think it was 13 different process areas from incident all the way down to self-service, change management, way beyond what you would typically expect a customer to dip their toe into the water with. They did it all in 9 months in a big bang. And now they've had so much success with that, they're continuing with Big Bang evolution, getting to the vision of ERP for IT, which I know you're a huge fan of.
Yeah.
They specifically talk about ERP for IT. But that's the expectation is people want very large movements from where they are today to where they need to be. And I say need because that's what it is. It truly is a need. They can't wait for these things to change. They have to drive the change, they have to force the change, and they have to rely on providers that are capable of delivering that and working with everybody else they have in their staff.
It's interesting you bring up ERP for IT because as the
you can get that $20 later.
Yeah, right. Checks in the mail. But let me put a little bit of a different spin on it because now we've got Agile and we've got DevOps, and there's a few things here that I think are very relevant to the service management space. In particular, you're seeing this pivot, and that's a word from that whole community too, from a project-centric model where you had your silos, you had your towers, and then you get the project managers and they get out the whip and they try to whip the results across the towers, to now you've got product-centric teams. You've got all your skills on one team, and these teams, it's been demonstrated. They can generate a lot of value. You get a fast feedback loop. You can get in front of your competitors in the business, you get far happier business partners because literally you are deploying 10 times a day or once a week, whatever the business calls for. The IT's no longer the constraint in some of these shops. And yet as I look at, and I know one major retailer in Minnesota, they've gone from 300 project-oriented teams to 300 product teams, and yet what happens to the classic IT service management processes, like say from the Oshkosh example? Do you still need an enterprise change process? Do you still need an incident process if it's all these, these tight little collaborations? Yeah. And I'm not ready to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, say we don't need this stuff, but it seems we at least need some reconsideration of what inter-team dynamics needs, what's the next stage in inter-team
But everybody's so advanced on config management, so we're all set, right?
Are you still beating that horse?
That's in a whole nother.
No, I think you're right.
It, right?
And it's, Gartner's been talking about bi-modal IT for years and years, and this is one of the few times where I actually agree with something Gartner has to say out of the gate. Is we've got to live in both worlds. I have yet to see a client who is ready to go, full agile DevOps, 100%, abandon their change programs and everything else, because we're still living in that, that hybrid world of needing the stability, for the corporate legacy systems, for the important critical systems that can't handle velocity that a DevOps or an agile approach may need to get it to a certain point. And they may not require the investment either. These may be semi-stable systems that are sitting there in a fairly, non-changing state.
Based on packaged software.
Exactly.
You're not developing it.
Yeah, you don't need to go into.
But I think we're going to be living in that bi-modal world for some time to come.
Absolutely.
And the traditional ITSM processes are only as dated as the people who are responsible for managing them. So I've always said when it comes to process management, if you require a weekly meeting to advance your process is probably broken. Processes by nature should allow things to flow through and catch exceptions and hand them off to someone who can deal with them. So if we're still having, the daily change meetings or the weekly change meetings, and we're still flogging things through the system, we probably need to look at that approach and say, okay, how do we pair that up with this high velocity DevOps Agile? Are there things coming out of that world that still need to be caught in that trap or in that filter and handled as an exception, whereas other things are going through as pre-configured changes where we can drive them through based off the risk and reward of the typical change thing.
Well, thank you, Shane. It's like, I mean, knowing you for as long as I have, I don't see you normally have like such an abrupt stop.
Yeah, really.
Thanks for joining.
What are you trying to say?
Thank you, Shane, for coming. Charlie, Ken,
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, guys.
Thanks, Carl.